The alarm tore through the steel corridors like a scream. Red lights flashed across the bridge of the New Horizon, bathing every surface in blood-colored glow. Captain Jake Morrison jolted from his chair. His heart raced, but years of discipline forced him forward. "Report!" His voice cracked with urgency. Lieutenant Corinne Wells pressed her trembling fingers against the console. "Captain, 3 ships. Massive. They're moving into our system, slow, limping. They look broken." Jake rushed to the main screen. Space unfolded in black silence, broken only by the glow of distant stars. Then the shapes emerged, 3 colossal vessels, scarred and smoking. Hulls riddled with holes, their engines flickering weakly like dying fires. The bridge fell silent. Humanity had dreamed of this moment for centuries, but no one expected it to look like this. "Sir, we're receiving a signal," Wells whispered. Jake swallowed hard. "What language?" "It's English, but strange, twisted, like it doesn't belong in any human mouth." The air on the bridge turned heavy. Jake nodded, "Put it through." The speakers crackled, spitting static, until a deep voice rolled over them like thunder across a barren plain. "Earth ships, we come in peace. We are Virii, we need help, many of our people are dying." Jake's crew froze, wide eyes, tight jaws, breath caught in throats. "First contact." Jake steadied himself and pressed his microphone. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth ship New Horizon. Can you tell us what happened to you?" Static filled the pause. Then came the reply, words slow and strained, as if dragged across stone. "We ran from those who wanted to kill us. We heard, Earth takes in those with nowhere else to go. Please, we have children." Jake's chest tightened. Children. His mind snapped to 2 faces back on Earth, his son's crooked smile, his daughter's fearless eyes. "Stand by, Virii ships," Jake said firmly. "Help is coming." 2 hours later, the Mercy, a medical vessel, slid into orbit beside the wounded giants. Admiral Lisa Carter's voice crackled over the comms. "Jake, we need to be careful," she said. Her words carried the weight of 2 decades spent studying alien life. "We don't know anything about them." "I know," Jake answered, "but they asked for help. That has to mean something." The docking arms extended. Metal groaned, atmosphere hissed. The first alien crossed into human space. He was tall, gaunt, his skin a pale shade of blue that shimmered faintly under the lights. His eyes were large, silver pools reflecting everything and nothing. His gray clothing hung in tatters, patched with crude stitches. "I am Kafir," he said slowly, careful with every syllable. "I speak for my people." Admiral Carter stepped forward, her heart pounding though she kept her shoulders square. "Welcome to human space, Kafir. I'm Admiral Lisa Carter. We want to help, but we need to understand your situation." Kafir's silver eyes clouded with sorrow. "We have traveled far. My people were slaves for 300 of your Earth years." The bridge crew shifted uneasily. Dr. Paul Henderson lifted his medical scanner, its soft hum cutting the silence. "They're close to us biologically, oxygen breathers, blood circulation, but their brains different, fascinating differences." "Who enslaved you?" Carter asked. "The Galactic Coalition," Kafir said bitterly. "They rule most of the galaxy. They said we were broken because we cannot connect to their mind networks. They called us defective." Jake frowned. "Mind networks?" Kafir raised a trembling hand to his forehead. "Most spacefaring races link their thoughts, share knowledge, control machines with their minds, but we cannot. So they used us as workers, fighters, tools." His voice cracked. "For centuries we dug their mines, fought their wars, built their cities, always in chains." The bridge seemed to shrink around them. Carter clenched her fists. She knew the human history of slavery, but to hear it echoed across the stars. "What changed?" she asked softly. Kafir's gaze hardened. "We discovered old records, a rebellion. Those rebels were like us, quantum blind. They fought differently, could not be controlled. We began to plan. For years we gathered weapons, ships. When we struck, we surprised them." His shoulders sagged. "But we were too few. Most of us died. Only 50,000 survived in these ships. We have been running for 2 years, searching for any world that might accept us." His voice dropped to a whisper. "If you cannot help us, we will die in space." Jake glanced at Carter, at Henderson, at Wells. Every eye on him burned with the same unspoken truth. This was bigger than them, bigger than their ship, bigger than Earth had ever faced. Jake activated the comms. "New Horizon to Earth Command. We need to speak with President Santos immediately." 30 minutes later, President Maria Santos appeared on the main screen. Her dark hair was pulled tight, her eyes sharp with exhaustion and resolve. Running Earth was no easy task. "Madam President," Jake said, his voice steadier than he felt, "this is Kafir of the Virii people." Kafir stepped forward, his silver eyes catching the light. "We beg sanctuary. If you turn us away, we will die." Santos studied him in silence. The weight of the moment pressed on every chest in the room. 50,000 alien refugees, a galactic empire that might come after them. Finally, Santos spoke. "Earth has a long history of helping refugees. We won't break that tradition now. Captain Morrison, escort the Virii ships to Luna Colony 7. We'll prepare facilities." Relief washed across Jake's face, but Santos's eyes darkened. "This decision will not be popular. If the Coalition comes looking for them, we must be ready." The call ended. Jake turned to Kafir. The alien's eyes shimmered, not just with light, but with something else, something Jake recognized. Hope. But in the shadows of deep space, far beyond the reach of human sensors, a single vessel stirred. Its hull was black as the void. Its eyes were endless. It had been watching, recording, hunting, and now it knew where the lost slaves had gone. The first days on Luna Colony 7 felt like a miracle. 50,000 Virii, men, women, children, poured from their battered ships into the half-finished colony. Human prefab buildings stood like gray skeletons under the pale light, but the Virii began shaping their own homes beside them. They grew strange living structures, walls that pulsed faintly, beams that bent like branches yet were strong as steel. Colonel Ben Tucker, commander of the colony, watched in cautious awe as human and alien children chased one another through the low-gravity streets. Their laughter rang like bells, bridging the gap between worlds. "Better than I expected," Tucker admitted to Yetka, a Virii engineer who had become his partner in managing the settlement. Yetka's silver eyes sparkled. "Your people are kind, kinder than we dared to hope, but—" She hesitated, her gaze drifting upward. "Not everyone on Earth shares that view." Before Tucker could ask, his communicator buzzed. The voice that spilled from it dripped with venom. "Colonel Tucker, this is Senator Richard Hayes. The people demand answers. These aliens are draining billions of resources. What happens when more of them show up? Who will you save then?" Tucker's jaw clenched. He cut the line without answering. Hayes had been whipping up fear since the Virii's arrival, holding rallies filled with angry faces shouting words like parasite and invasion. Still, Tucker told himself the colony thrived. That mattered more than politics. On Earth, Dr. Amy Foster bent over her instruments, her eyes wide with wonder. Beside her stood Quindal, a young Virii scientist, his hands glowing faintly as the quantum generator hummed. "I can see the streams," Quindal whispered, his silver eyes flaring like liquid metal. "The currents of energy between stars, they flow like rivers." Foster squinted at her monitors. The readings were there, the fluctuations clear, yet she saw nothing with her eyes. "You can actually see quantum fields." "All Virii can," Quindal said softly. "It is how we navigate space without computers. It is how we survived when others called us broken." Foster leaned back, breathless. The Coalition had called them defective for being quantum blind. But this was no weakness. It was a gift. While children played and scientists marveled, unease crept at the edges of the system. Lieutenant Commander Chris Palmer, stationed at the colony's defense outpost, was halfway through his lunch when Jexalin, a young Virii warrior, sat across from him. "The currents are disturbed today," Jexalin muttered, his voice taut. Palmer set down his tray. "What does that mean?" "Something large moves near your outer planets, something that does not belong." Palmer's blood ran cold. He snatched his communicator. "Palmer to Admiral Morrison, sir, we might have a problem." Hours later, the command center of Earth's primary defense station buzzed with tense voices. Admiral Jake Morrison stood with arms crossed, eyes fixed on the long-range display. A ship hung at the edge of the solar system, dark, silent, watching. "It's been there 6 hours," Lieutenant Wells reported. "No communication, no movement." Admiral Lisa Carter joined Morrison at the screen, her voice grim. "Coalition design, a Seeker-class scout ship, they're hunters." Kafir and 3 Virii leaders studied the readings with haunted faces. They use seekers to find escaped slaves, Kafir said. It is scanning your system, learning your defenses. Morrison's jaw tightened. What do they usually do next? They report back, another Virii whispered. Then the coalition decides whether to attack or negotiate. Negotiate what? Morrison asked. Our return, Kafir said simply. They still see us as property. The word hung in the air like poison. For 3 days, the seeker lingered. Morrison doubled the patrols, but the hunter ship never flinched. It just sat at the edge of human space, patient as a predator. On the 4th day, Palmer arrived with Jexallen. His voice carried urgency. Sir, Jexallen has a plan, dangerous, but it could change everything. Jexallen stepped forward, silver eyes bright with fire. We know these ships. We built them as slaves. Their weaknesses are ours to exploit. If you give us a strike team, we can take it. Morrison stared at him, stunned. You're talking about boarding a coalition scout. Yes, Jexallen said. Its crew will be small, 5, maybe 6 soldiers. They won't expect attack. We can use the currents to slip past its shields. You have soldiers, we have knowledge. Together we can win. Carter frowned, and if you're wrong. Then the coalition learns where we are anyway, Jexallen answered. Better to risk now than wait for an army. The room fell silent. Every officer knew the risk. If they failed, Earth would lose its secrecy and perhaps its future. Morrison looked at his crew, at Jexallen's burning eyes, at the silent fear in Kafir's face. He took a deep breath. All right, we're going after it. The strike shuttle launched under the cover of darkness. Inside, 6 human Marines strapped in beside 3 Virii warriors. Palmer sat at the front, rifle across his lap, heart hammering. Beside him, Jexallen leaned close, whispering into the silence. Trust me, I see the streams, I'll guide us. The shuttle trembled as it slid into the unseen current only the Virii could sense. To human eyes, it looked like empty space. To Jexallen, it was a crack in the hunter's shield. There, he whispered. The shuttle darted forward. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then alarms screamed as the hunter ship detected them. Move, Palmer shouted. The shuttle slammed against the coalition hull. Explosives blew the hatch wide, fire and smoke spilling into the alien corridors. The battle was brutal and close. Coalition soldiers, tall, gray-skinned beings with 4 arms, poured from their posts, their weapons spitting fire. But the Marines fought like wolves, rifles barking, grenades booming. And the Virii moved like shadows. They knew every corner, every hidden vent, every weak panel. Within an hour, the scout ship was theirs. Bloodied, exhausted, but alive. Palmer ripped his helmet off and gasped. Admiral, the ship is secure. Back on Earth, Dr. Foster and Quindall studied the captured vessel with breathless fascination. Its walls pulsed faintly. Its consoles were living tissue. Their computers are biological, Foster whispered. They grow them like brains. Can we access their data? Morrison asked. Quindall's silver eyes gleamed. We built these systems once, we can break them. It took 3 weeks, but when the databanks opened, the truth poured out like fire. A star map bloomed across the main screen. Red markers covered it like bloodstains. Each one, a world under coalition control. Billions enslaved. Kafir stared at the map, his voice hollow. Every red mark is a world in chains. They have ruled for thousands of years. But there was more. Logs revealed whispers spreading across the galaxy. Refugees had heard of Earth's defiance. Ships were already coming. How many? Morrison asked. The first, Foster said, her face pale. A crystalline race called the Kethnari, 2 months. After that, many more. Silence fell. And then President Santos's voice cut through the comms, steady as stone. We are about to become the galaxy's refugee center. The question is, are we ready for that responsibility? But before Morrison could answer, Wells's voice cracked across the bridge, trembling with fear. Admiral sensors show a fleet. Coalition design, 200 ships heading straight for Earth. The blood drained from Morrison's face. They'll be here in 6 days. The War Council chamber on Earth was suffocating with tension. President Maria Santos stood at the head of the long table. Around her sat representatives from every major human nation, and for the first time in history, alien leaders from Luna Colony 7. Silver eyes, crystal forms, shimmering gas bodies in containment spheres. The news hung over them like a guillotine. 200 coalition warships were on approach, 6 days. "We need to be clear," Santos said. Her voice was firm, though her hands tightened around her notes. "This isn't just Earth's problem anymore. If they win here, they will drag the Virii back into chains. And if they win easily, they will come for us all." Murmurs rippled around the room. Fear, anger, doubt. Admiral Jake Morrison leaned forward, his jaw set. "Madam President, Earth's fleet has 50 ships ready for battle. We're strong, but against 200, we won't last." Kafir, seated beside him, raised his voice. "Then let my people fight with you. We know the coalition, their weaknesses, their patterns. We are not broken, not anymore." A sharp voice cut across him. Senator Hayes, his face red with fury. "This is madness. You would risk our entire species for them, for aliens, send them away before it's too late." The room erupted, shouts, arguments, voices colliding like thunder. "Silence!" Santos's single word cracked through the chamber like a whip. The shouting stopped. She fixed her gaze on Hayes. "Earth has always stood for those who could not stand for themselves. That will not change now. We will not turn our backs." Hayes glared but said nothing. Santos turned to Morrison. "Admiral, you are in command. Do what you must. Buy us time. Give us hope." 3 days later, the shipyards of Earth thundered with activity. Human engineers welded steel, sparks flying like falling stars. Virii workers fused living material into hulls, their strange growths bending seamlessly into human designs. Crystalline Kethnari, who had arrived sooner than expected, embedded shards of their glowing bodies into engines, amplifying their power. Even the gaseous Morton, drifting in containment fields, altered atmospheric systems with whispers of energy. For the first time, Earth's ships were no longer only human. They were something new. Dr. Amy Foster stood in the heart of the chaos, exhaustion carving shadows under her eyes. She tapped a console, projecting holograms of hybrid ships. "The Virii bioneural networks make our computers think faster. The Kethnari crystals store power like nothing we've seen. And the Morton, their gas bodies bend energy fields. Together we can create shields the Coalition has never faced." Morrison studied the designs, awe in his eyes. "How many of these ships can we finish before the fleet arrives?" 20 prototypes are already operational," Foster said. "More if we push past the limits." "That'll have to do." On Luna Colony 7, Lieutenant Commander Chris Palmer trained with mixed crews. Human Marines sparred with Virii warriors, their movements sharp and brutal. Kethnari pulsed with light, projecting barriers that absorbed stun blasts. Morton flowed like fog, confusing sensors and training equipment. Palmer wiped sweat from his brow and looked at Jeksalin, who was already on his feet after a hard fall. "You fight like a storm," Palmer said with a grin. Jeksalin bared his teeth in what passed for a Virii smile. "And you fight like fire. Together, storm and fire may be enough." Palmer laughed, but the sound was strained. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Let's hope so." Meanwhile, far beyond Neptune, the Coalition fleet cut through the Black Sea of stars. At its center, towering above all others, was the Dominion, the flagship of Grand Admiral Zethchorus. He stood tall on the command deck, pale skin like marble, black eyes absorbing the light. His voice, mechanical and cold, carried across every ship in the Armada. "People of Earth," he transmitted, "you harbor stolen property that belongs to us. Return them or your world will burn." On Earth, the broadcast echoed through every screen, every radio, every handheld. Streets filled with silence, then with shouts. Protesters surged. Supporters prayed. Families clutched each other. On Luna Colony 7, Kafir stood before a crowd of Virii. His voice shook with emotion. "We are not property, we are people. If Earth stands with us, then we must stand with them. We will fight, not just for survival, but for freedom." The crowd roared, voices raw with determination. In orbit, the hybrid fleet gathered. 50 human ships, 20 prototypes glowing with alien power, and dozens of smaller refugee craft outfitted for war. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiant, Earth's new flagship. Lieutenant Wells at her station, Carter by his side, every crew member tight with anticipation. "Admiral," Wells said, her voice low, "Coalition fleet will arrive in 22 hours." The words settled over them like ash. Morrison closed his eyes for a moment, then straightened. "Send a final message to all crews." His voice spread across the fleet, carried into every chamber, every ship, every heart. This is Admiral Morrison. The enemy believes we are weak, that we will bow, but we are not fighting alone. Humans, Virii, Kethnari, Morton, today we fight as one. We may be outnumbered, but we are not outmatched. Remember this, we fight not for conquest, but for home, not for power, but for freedom. If they want us, they'll have to go through us all. The words echoed, and for a moment fear gave way to fire. Hours passed. Final preparations hummed like a storm building in silence. Dr. Foster hunched over her monitors, her voice hoarse. The quantum shields are holding in tests, but I don't know how they'll perform in real combat. Then we'll find out the hard way, Morrison said grimly. Palmer checked his rifle, his hands steady despite the weight pressing down on his chest. Jexallen stood beside him, eyes sharp. "We will not break," the Virii whispered. In the War Council chamber, President Santos stared out the window at the stars, her reflection a ghost across the glass. "God help us," she whispered. Then the sky tore open. 200 ships, sleek and merciless, burst into the system. The Dominion's shadow stretched across the stars. And the war for Earth began. The black of space shattered with light. The Coalition fleet surged forward like a storm of steel and fire. 200 warships bristling with weapons, their hulls cold and merciless. At their center, the Dominion loomed, so vast it seemed less a ship than a floating city of death. On the bridge of the Defiant, Admiral Jake Morrison gripped the rail so tightly his knuckles whitened. "All ships, defensive formation, hold the line." Lieutenant Wells's voice shook as she read the data. "They're charging primary weapons, incoming in 30 seconds. Morrison's gut twisted. This was it, humanity's first true war among the stars. "Shields up," he ordered. "Every ship hold steady." The first salvo came like the wrath of gods. Energy beams, bright as suns, ripped across the void, tearing into Earth's forward defenses. Explosions bloomed, ships shuddered, alarms screamed. "Defiant holding," Wells reported. 2 frigates lost, Endeavour crippled. "Return fire," Morrison barked. Earth's fleet lit the dark with missiles, railguns, plasma bolts, every weapon they had. The Coalition shields flared, absorbing most of it, but a few beams slipped through, tearing scars across alien hulls. The hybrids moved next. 20 prototype vessels glowed like stars, their Virii bio-neural networks humming, their Kethnari crystal cores shining. Morton gas vessels swirled around them, bending the flow of energy. "Shields are bending their weapons," Foster gasped from her lab. "It's working, the Morton fields are twisting the beams." On the battlefield, Coalition blasts curved away, sliding harmlessly into the void. Earth's ships darted forward under the cover of impossible defenses. "Now," Morrison roared. The hybrids struck. Crystal cannons fired beams that sliced through enemy shields like knives through glass. Morton storms swirled around enemy formations, scattering their coordination. Virii gunners, their quantum sight guiding every shot, hit targets before human computers could calculate them. The Coalition staggered. On board the Freedom, Admiral Lisa Rodriguez clenched her teeth. Their reeling pushed them. Her crew, a mix of humans, Virii, and Kethnari, moved as one. Orders flowed smoothly, the bridge alive with voices from 3 species. The Freedom danced through fire, firing burst after burst into a Coalition cruiser until it split apart in a flash of white flame. Cheers erupted, but the celebration died quickly. "Multiple enemy ships inbound," her first officer called. "They're regrouping, 10-to-1 odds." Rodriguez's face hardened. "Then we give them hell." Meanwhile, Lieutenant Commander Chris Palmer led a boarding squad through chaos. His shuttle clamped onto a damaged Coalition frigate, sparks raining as the hatch blew open. "Go, go," Palmer shouted. Marines poured through, rifles blazing. Jexallen and 2 Virii warriors followed, their blades flashing silver in the dark halls. The Coalition soldiers fought with savage strength, 4 arms swinging, weapons spitting fire. Blood sprayed, screams echoed. The corridors burned with chaos. Palmer ducked a blast, rolling into cover. He fired 3 times, dropping an enemy. Jexallen leapt over him, slashing through another soldier with precise fury. Together, storm and fire. When the last enemy fell, Palmer gasped for air. "Bridge secure. Admiral, the frigate is ours." Morrison's voice cracked back. "Good work. Use their guns against them. Every ship counts." Palmer glanced at Jexallen, who was already at the controls, his silver eyes glowing as he linked to the enemy systems. "For the first time," Jexellen whispered, "we fight with our own chains broken." The battle stretched on, hours of fire, ships shattered like glass, the void filled with debris and bodies. Morrison stood on the Defiant, his face grim, his voice iron. "Report." Wells's voice trembled. "We've lost 22 ships, half our fleet is crippled, but we've destroyed 40 coalition vessels." 40 against 200. Morrison's gut twisted. It wasn't enough. Then Wells's eyes widened. "Admiral, new contacts, dozens of ships dropping out of FTL." The crew braced, expecting more coalition reinforcements. But the symbols on the screen were different. Alien ships, dozens of them. Shapes no human had ever seen, sleek cybernetic forms, massive plant-like structures, vessels made of shimmering energy. Rodriguez gasped, What are they?" Wells's voice cracked. "They're broadcasting, they say they're survivors, civilizations the Coalition thought extinct. They heard Earth was fighting, they came to help." Morrison stared at the screen, stunned. "All ships open channels, tell them welcome to the fight." The newcomers dove into battle, striking Coalition ships from the flank. Chaos erupted across the enemy lines. For the first time, the odds began to shift. On the Dominion, Grand Admiral Zethchorus gripped the edge of his command chair. His black eyes burned with fury. "How is this possible?" he snarled. "These species should be extinct. These weapons should not exist." His science officer's voice trembled. "Admiral, they're not following any known combat patterns. It's as if they see our moves before we make them." Zethchorus's mechanical voice grew colder. "Then we show them why the Coalition has ruled for 10,000 years. All ships crush them." The final phase of the battle erupted around the Dominion. Coalition vessels tightened their formation, pressing forward with overwhelming firepower. Earth's fleet, refugees, and their new allies fought like a wall of flame. The Defiant shuddered under a direct hit. Sparks rained, consoles burst, smoke filled the bridge. "Shields failing," Wells shouted. "Hold the line," Morrison roared. On the Freedom, Rodriguez's voice cut through the chaos. "Admiral, we need to break their command ship. Take out the Dominion and the fleet will falter." Morrison's jaw clenched. He knew she was right, but the Dominion was vast, layered in shields and escorts. He opened the channel, his voice carried to every ship. "All vessels, focus fire on their flagship. We end this now." The galaxy erupted in light as dozens of species, united for the first time, hurled everything they had at the Dominion. Kethnari crystal beams cut through escorts. Morton storms smothered enemy shields. Virii gunners guided human fire into weak points. The Dominion shook under the impossible assault. Its shields flickered, cracked, and finally broke. On the bridge, Zethchorus staggered as fire tore through his ship. His black eyes locked onto Morrison's face across the communication screen. "You have no idea what you have done," he hissed. "The Coalition has ruled for millennia. You think one battle will end us." Morrison's voice was steel. "Not one battle, but it's a start." The Dominion exploded in a burst of white fire, the shockwave rippling across the stars. Cheers erupted across the Allied fleet. Coalition ships faltered, many turning to flee. It was victory. But it would not last. 3 weeks later, as humanity celebrated, new shadows appeared at the edge of the system. 50 ships, darker and sharper than any before. Dr. Foster stared at the readings, her face pale with dread. "Admiral, these aren't like the others. These are Void Reapers. They carry reality bombs." Morrison blinked. "Reality bombs? What in hell is that?" Quindal's voice shook. "Weapons that erase entire star systems, not just destroy them, erase them so they never existed at all." The command center went silent. And then a new voice filled every channel, cold, ancient. "I am Supreme Commander Velanos of the Coalition. Your defiance ends now. Surrender the quantum-blind species, or your world will be erased from reality itself." The command center of Earth's primary defense station was silent. Admiral Jake Morrison stared at the holographic display, where the new fleet hung like black daggers against the void. 50 ships, each radiating a deadly energy signature unlike anything human sensors had ever recorded. Dr. Amy Foster's voice cracked as she replayed the data. Admiral, the logs we pulled from the Dominion confirm it. These ships are Void Reapers. They carry weapons that destabilize spacetime at the quantum level. They don't just destroy matter, they erase it from history itself. Morrison's gut clenched. You're saying if they hit Earth? Foster's eyes glistened. It won't just be gone, it will be as if it never existed. The words hung heavy, even the air seemed to thin. Supreme Commander Villanos's message replayed across every screen in the system. His voice was deep and ancient, cold as ice cracking over black water. Surrender the quantum-blind species, and your world will be allowed to exist. Refuse, and we will erase your system from reality itself. On Earth, protests erupted. Fear swept the streets. Some shouted for surrender, terrified of extinction. Others roared in defiance, refusing to betray the Virii. At Luna Colony 7, Kafir stood before his people. His silver eyes burned with guilt. This is our fault. We brought this danger to them. Perhaps we should go. Yetka grabbed his hand, fierce. No, they gave us sanctuary. If we leave, the coalition wins. We will fight with them even if it costs everything. In the defense chamber, refugee leaders gathered. Kethnari crystals pulsed with sorrowful light. Morton gaseous forms swirled restlessly. Virii warriors stood silent, faces grim. Morrison's voice was steady but hard. We need options, fast. Keithvar, an elder Virii leader, raised his voice. The reality bombs cannot be stopped by weapons, but perhaps by us. Foster blinked. What do you mean? Jexallan stepped forward, his eyes glowing faintly. The coalition fears us for a reason, our quantum blindness. It makes us immune to their mind networks. It also anchors reality. If enough of us link together, we might form a shield, a firewall that holds spacetime in place. Foster's eyes widened. A quantum firewall, of course. If we can connect immune minds across species, we might stabilize the quantum lattice and block the bombs from functioning. Morrison's voice sharpened. How many do we need? Foster exchanged a grave look with Quindal. All of them, every quantum-blind being in the system. The chamber went still. Every refugee, every Virii child, every Kethnari elder, all linked. The cost would be enormous. Santos's voice cut through, strong and steady. Do it. If this is our only chance, we take it. Humanity does not surrender, not now, not ever. The work began immediately. Across the system, ships moved toward Earth. The Kethnari constructed massive crystal nodes in orbit, their bodies resonating with power as they grew structures like colossal towers of living diamond. The Morton reshaped themselves into glowing conduits, their gaseous forms channeling energy between nodes. On Luna Colony 7, human engineers set up vast arrays of transmitters, their steel frames laced with alien biotech. Refugee volunteers lined up by the thousands, ready to lend their minds. Dr. Foster oversaw it all, her voice hoarse from endless hours. The link will merge their consciousness into a single field. If it works, the firewall will spread across the solar system. Palmer frowned as he adjusted a relay. And if it does? Foster didn't answer. The day of reckoning came. 75 Void Reaper vessels surrounded the solar system, their hulls glowing with deadly energy. On the Oblivion, the flagship of the Supreme Commander, Villanos stood tall. His form was thin and withered, his skin pale as ash, his eyes pits of endless hatred. Prepare the bombs, he commanded. His voice was calm, like a man ordering the tide to rise. Target Earth first, leave nothing. On the Defiant, Morrison stood at his station, heart pounding. He had joined the link himself, though he was not quantum blind. He wanted to share the burden even if it killed him. Firewall activation in 60 seconds, Wells reported, her voice taut. Jexallan stood nearby, his eyes already glowing. Steady your mind, Admiral. It will feel like drowning, but also like flying. Morrison smirked grimly. Story of my life. The countdown ticked, 10, 9, 8. On Earth, millions of refugees closed their eyes. Virii children clutched their parents' hands. Kethnari crystals pulsed brighter. Morton forms shimmered like auroras. At the heart of it all, Foster and Quindal activated the link. The universe shifted. Morrison gasped as his mind was torn wide open. He felt himself stretch beyond his body, beyond his ship, beyond his own thoughts. Suddenly, he was not alone. He was with Jexallan, his thoughts fierce and burning, with Kafir, whose sorrow was a deep ocean, with Yetka, whose resolve was steel, with Kethnari voices that sang like choirs of light, with Morton minds that flowed like rivers of stars. Millions of voices linked together, one will, one shield. The quantum firewall ignited. A glow spread from Earth, wrapping around the solar system like a cocoon of light. On the Oblivion, Velanos' eyes narrowed. Fire. Reality bombs launched. Black spheres tore through space, each one rippling with impossible energy. Morrison felt them coming, felt the universe tremble. The bombs struck the firewall. For a terrible moment, spacetime quaked. The glow faltered. Voices cried out in Morrison's mind. Pain, fear, doubt. Hold, Morrison shouted, though his lips were no longer his own. His voice echoed through millions of minds. Hold the line. The firewall blazed brighter. The bombs slowed, then stopped. Their impossible energy unraveled, dissolving into harmless sparks. On the Oblivion, Velanos' face twisted in fury. The bombs, they have failed. But the Supreme Commander's voice hardened. If we cannot erase them, we burn them. All ships, attack. The Void Reaper fleet surged forward, weapons blazing. On the Defiant, alarms screamed. Wells shouted over the chaos. Firewalls holding against the bombs, but it won't stop conventional fire. Morrison bared his teeth. Then we fight them the old way, all ships engage. The second great battle for Earth began. Human ships darted forward, firing railguns and plasma bursts. Virii gunners guided every shot. Kethnari crystal ships absorbed enemy blasts and hurled them back. Morton gas vessels swirled through the void, twisting enemy formations. But the Void Reapers were stronger than anything they had faced. Their weapons cut through shields. Their armor was thick as mountains. The void burned with chaos. On the Freedom, Rodriguez shouted over explosions. Focus fire on their escorts, break their formation. On Earth, Santos's voice broadcast to every ship. Stand firm, you fight for more than survival, you fight for every free being in the galaxy. In the quantum link, Morrison felt himself stretched to the breaking point. Millions of minds pressed against his own. Fear gnawed at him. Jexellen's voice cut through like steel. Do not falter, my friend. Storm and fire together. Morrison gritted his teeth. Together. But even as the Allied fleet fought with fury, Velanos still stood calm aboard the Oblivion. His black eyes glittered with cruel certainty. They resist well, he said. But resistance only delays the inevitable. Their shield will falter, their unity will break, and when it does, we will erase them all. The battle for Earth blazed like a second sun in the void. Human and refugee ships darted through firestorms of plasma. Railguns spat slugs that burned like meteors. Morton gas vessels twisted themselves into shimmering clouds that bent beams away. Kethnari crystal ships caught the fury of enemy cannons and refracted it back, spearing coalition hulls with light. But the Void Reapers were relentless. Each vessel was a fortress, every weapon strike cutting through shields like blades through cloth. Admiral Rodriguez aboard the Freedom shouted orders as her crew worked at breakneck speed. Port batteries, fire, launch strike drones, wave 3. Her first officer, a Jexistari hybrid, reported grimly. Shields at 30%. Hull breaches on decks 9 through 12. Rodriguez gritted her teeth. We hold, damn it, we hold. Inside the quantum link, Admiral Morrison felt the weight of 1,000,000 minds pressing against his own. The firewall held against the bombs, but every second was agony. It was like trying to hold the ocean with bare hands. He felt Yetka's fierce determination. Do not let go, we have no other home. He felt Quindal's steady brilliance. Balance the flow, anchor it with logic. He felt Jexellen's warrior spirit. Stand, fight, burn, but never bow. Morrison added his own voice to the chorus. We don't break, we don't surrender, not today. On Earth, people watched the sky with naked eyes. Streaks of fire lit the night as debris from shattered ships rained down, burning trails across the atmosphere. In refugee camps, children cried, clutching their parents. At Luna Colony 7, Palmer moved through evacuation lines, guiding frightened families to shelters. But his eyes kept straying to the stars where his friends fought and bled. Beside him, Jexellen's younger brother, Sareth, stood ready with a rifle. I should be there with them, the young Virii said, silver eyes blazing. Palmer laid a hand on his shoulder. You're here keeping people safe. That's just as important. Don't forget that. Sareth's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Back in the void, the tide of battle shifted again. Enemy reinforcements incoming, Wells cried aboard the Defiant. 2 more squadrons entering the system. Morrison's stomach sank. The Allied fleet was already at the breaking point. Another wave could crush them. Jexalen's voice flared in his mind. There is a way, but it will cost us. What way? Morrison demanded. The Virii warrior's mental tone was grim. We can push through their flagship's defenses by guiding you, but one of us must anchor inside the firewall permanently. Morrison's chest tightened. You mean sacrifice? Yes. On the Oblivion, Supreme Commander Velanos watched calmly as his fleet pressed the attack. His science officer reported, "Our losses mount, but the enemy cannot last much longer. Their formations falter." Velanos' thin lips curled into a cruel smile. Good, break them, and when the firewall collapses, unleash the bombs again. Let their resistance vanish into nothingness. Rodriguez's voice burst over the comms, harsh with desperation. Admiral Morrison, if we don't take that flagship, the rest is pointless. Their coordination comes from it. We cut off the head, the body dies. Morrison knew she was right, but the Oblivion was a monster. Shields layered over shields, escorts swarming like hornets. Every approach ended in fire. Then Jexalen's voice rang clear in the link. I will lead you in. My eyes can see the quantum weak points, but once I anchor the firewall, I will not return. Morrison's gut twisted. No, there has to be another way. Jexalen's silver gaze met his across the bridge, though their bodies were light years apart. There is not. You taught me something, Jake. That sacrifice means nothing if it's only for yourself, but if it's for others, it means everything. Morrison's throat closed. He wanted to argue, he wanted to forbid it, but deep down he knew Jexalen was right. The strike began. Rodriguez led half the fleet into a feint, drawing escorts away. Kethnari crystal ships blazed like stars, absorbing enemy fire to clear a path. Morton vessels swirled into storm shapes, disorienting sensors. The Defiant surged forward, engines burning white-hot. At its helm, Morrison felt Jexalen's presence guiding him. Left, now roll, thread the fire, there, a fracture in their shield matrix, drive into it. The Allied fleet followed, plunging into the heart of the storm. On the Oblivion, Velanos finally stirred from his calm. They're coming. All batteries target the human flagship, burn it from the void. The ship unleashed a torrent of plasma and missiles. Space itself seemed to ignite. Inside the firewall, Jexalen's voice sharpened. Now, anchor the line, protect them all. Morrison felt his friend pull away, felt the firewall surge as Jexalen fused with it completely. A blinding flare rippled across the system. The Allied fleet's shields strengthened, deflecting blasts that would have torn them apart. But Morrison also felt the loss. Jexalen's voice faded, leaving silence in its place. The Defiant burst through the last line of fire. Target lock on the Oblivion, Wells shouted. Fire everything, Morrison roared. Missiles, plasma, and railgun fire streaked into the flagship. Kethnari beams split through weakened shields. Morton storms tore into its engines. The Oblivion shuddered, its hull cracking. Inside, Velanos gripped the railing, fury twisting his face. This is not the end, he hissed. I am the will of the Coalition, I am eternal. But the Defiant's final salvo tore through his command deck. Fire consumed the Supreme Commander's form. The Oblivion exploded in a blaze that lit the void for thousands of miles. Cheers erupted across the Allied fleet, but it was short-lived. Wells's voice trembled. Admiral, sensors show the rest of the Void Reaper fleet is still advancing. They're not retreating. Morrison's heart sank. Even without Velanos, the Reapers were too many. The firewall trembled without Jexalen's anchor. And then something impossible happened. New ships appeared at the system's edge. Dozens, hundreds, strange designs no one had seen in living memory. Rodriguez gasped, Who? Communications lit up with 100 voices. This is the Zorthani Collective. We heard Earth had stood against the Coalition. We come to fight. We are the Velkari, energy-born. We will not let the enslavers reign. Jixari cyberclans reporting we survived, and now we strike back. Extinct civilizations, forgotten peoples, all arriving drawn by Earth's defiance. The tide of battle shifted once more. In the command center, Morrison stared at the growing fleet, tears stinging his eyes. He was right. Jexallen was right. When you stand for others, they come. The comms roared with voices of every species, ready to fight. The galaxy itself had joined the war. And as the Allied armada surged forward, the Void Reapers finally began to falter. The Void was a battlefield of fire and broken steel. The Oblivion was gone, ripped apart in a storm of light and fury, but the fight raged on. 50 Void Reaper vessels still thundered forward, their weapons tearing chunks from the Allied fleet. Admiral Morrison stood on the Defiance bridge, gripping the railing so hard his knuckles bled. His heart still ached from Jexallen's absence in the quantum link. That silence hurt worse than the hull breaches or the screams in the comms. But then the impossible happened. The newcomers surged into the fight. Zorthani plant ships, their living hulls like massive twisted vines, coiled around Void Reapers and crushed them until the ships imploded. Valkyrie energy beings flared into dazzling shapes, hurling bolts of pure radiation that ripped enemy hulls apart. The Jexari cyberclans attacked with swarms of smaller craft, their cybernetic minds fighting as one. The galaxy itself had answered Earth's call. "Admiral, look at the readings," Wells cried, pointing at her console. "The firewall's stabilizing, the new species, they're joining the link." Morrison gasped as the connection in his mind swelled again. Millions of voices became billions. The firewall blazed brighter, more solid, a wall of light against the void. And in that unity, Morrison felt something that made his chest tighten. Jexallen's presence, faint but steady, not whole, not alive as he had been, but a whisper, a memory preserved in the link. "Stan, Jake, finish it." Rodriguez's freedom led the vanguard, its guns blazing. "Target the nearest Reaper, drive them back." Crystal ships focused their beams, Morton storms swirled into maelstroms, and human fighters struck from every angle. One Reaper vessel cracked apart in an explosion that rippled across the stars. On Earth, crowds who had gathered in fear now screamed in awe as the night sky lit up with alien fire. Refugees on Luna Colony 7 clung to each other, hope dawning in their silver, crystalline, and gaseous eyes. Palmer stood among them, staring upward. His voice trembled as he whispered to the children, "They're winning, we're winning." But the Reapers did not yield easily. 3 of the monstrous vessels turned as one and unleashed a volley that slammed into the Freedom. Rodriguez was thrown against her console. Blood streamed down her face as alarms shrieked. "Damage control," she barked, staggering to her feet. "We're not done yet, fire everything we've got." The Freedom's last salvo struck true, piercing one Reaper's core. It detonated in a chain reaction, taking another with it. Rodriguez slumped into her chair, exhausted but unbroken. In the link, Morrison felt the combined will of the galaxy sharpen like a blade. "This is it," he said aloud. His voice carried not only through the Defiant but through the shared minds of billions. "We end it now. For every slave, for every refugee, for every world they burned, this ends today." The Allied fleet surged forward in perfect unison, each species, strength blending with the others. Crystal beams sliced through Reaper shields. Morton storms choked their engines. Valkyrie lightning burned their hulls from within. Human ingenuity wove it all together, precise, relentless, defiant. The Void Reapers fell one by one. On the last surviving Reaper vessel, its commander stared at the chaos in disbelief. "It cannot be. They are united." The ship tried to retreat, but it was too late. Allied ships swarmed it from all sides. A final barrage reduced it to fragments. Silence fell. The battlefield was littered with wreckage, but the Reapers were gone. Inside the quantum link, Morrison felt the firewall ease, then dissolve. The voices began to separate, but they did not fade into despair. They lingered, warm and bright, carrying the knowledge that together they had achieved the impossible. He whispered into the link, his heart aching, "Jexallen, it's over." The faint echo replied, like a breath of wind through silver leaves, "It's only the beginning." 3 weeks later, the great assembly hall on Luna Colony 7 overflowed with life. Hundreds of species filled the chamber, their shapes and colors forming a living tapestry. Crystals hummed, gas beings shimmered, plant ships sent tendrils that swayed like trees in the wind. At the center, President Maria Santos stood tall. Her voice rang out, steady and proud. 5 years ago, we gave sanctuary to a people in need. Today, we stand united as the Galactic Alliance. Not slaves, not enemies, but free beings bound by hope and trust. Thunderous applause shook the hall. At the front, Morrison sat among his old crew, his hair streaked with gray but his eyes sharp. Beside him, Kafir watched with silver eyes full of quiet pride. Rodriguez, now an admiral of the Alliance Defense Fleet, stood in uniform, her medals gleaming. Dr. Foster sat nearby, surrounded by alien scientists already sketching new designs. And in the crowd, Palmer smiled as Virii, Kethnari, and human children played together without fear. Then, to everyone's surprise, the final speaker approached. Grand Admiral Zethoris, once the Coalition's most feared commander, now clad not in armor but in simple robes. He bowed before the assembly. I was once your enemy. I enslaved worlds. I believed difference was weakness. I was wrong. The humans taught me that strength lies not in chains but in compassion. They showed me that unity makes us unbreakable. The chamber rose in thunderous applause. Even those who had once feared him cheered, because they all knew change was possible. After the ceremony, Morrison wandered to the memorial garden built outside the colony. Crystalline walls shimmered with names, humans and aliens who had fallen in the war. His hand traced one name, Jexalin. Beside him, Santos stood quietly. Do you ever wonder, Admiral, what would have happened if we had turned them away? Morrison gazed at the stars above. He thought of battles, of friendships, of children laughing in a dozen languages. No, he said softly, because then none of this would exist. Santos nodded. Then we made the right choice. That night the colony glowed with light. Ships from dozens of worlds came and went, carrying goods, people, and stories. In the homes, human lullabies mixed with crystal harmonies, and gaseous beings whispered tales of distant suns. The Casticide had found shelter, and in that shelter they had built something beautiful. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, dark. But it was no longer empty. Because wherever beings suffered, wherever the lost searched for hope, they would find a small blue planet that opened its arms. Earth had become more than humanity's home. It had become the home of hope itself. And as new distress signals flickered from the far edges of the quantum streams, preparations already began. For humanity had chosen its role in the stars. Not conquerors, not rulers, but guardians. The galaxy would never be the same.